Mr. Herdman, besides the bridge case, you've been involved with the riots that broke out in 2020. The FBI lacked the familiarity with Antifa movement to see violence or new riots coming, something both Barr and Wolf warned about when they were secretaries. You've also seen threats from white racists, jihadists, and actors with anti-law enforcement ideologies. How do we ensure that the Department of Justice and the FBI are nimble and flexible, just enough to respond to threats of violence caused by different ideologies? And how varied is the domestic terrorism threat right now?
Thank you, Senator. Well, the bottom line is, if you're in federal law enforcement, you have to look at the conduct and the threat as it is being contemplated. So you look to the violent act, you look to the planning, and you look to the preparation. And frankly, the ideology matters far less when you're trying to disrupt a terrorism event than the actual conduct of the perpetrators. And it has to be that way. Now, ultimately at trial, that ideology or whatever is motivating that person to commit this act is important because it's motive evidence and it's something that you would want before the jury. But you have to have federal law enforcement postured to be able to identify and respond to actual conduct by individuals. And that requires well-trained agents and prosecutors. That requires close coordination with local law enforcement. That requires close coordination with communities, particularly vulnerable communities, like I mentioned in my testimony, the Jewish community among them, Muslims as well, a whole host of communities of color and ethnicity that are under threat. You have to be postured to be able to respond. And also, I would add, Senator, you have to be flexible in the way that you intake complaints. It's very important for federal law enforcement to be responsive to complaints from the public and to ensure that they are able to prioritize and respond to complaints that are brought to their attention.
Professor Turley, is it constitutional and prudential to direct executive branch officers to investigate in combating violence committed pursuant to some extremist ideology more than others?
I think that it is at best problematic. I actually think it does run afoul of separation of powers. I admit that this is that sort of gray area. Separation of powers is not hermetically sealed. There are overlaps between the executive and legislative. But I think this would not fare well in terms of trying to force a priority between individual cases. The Supreme Court has said over and over again, in the cases that I cite, in cases like Quinn, that even though this body itself has investigatory powers, it cannot intrude upon the choice of targets, development of cases, priorities given to particular areas by the executive branch. That's pretty consistent coming out of the Supreme Court in lower court cases. So that's the one flag that I threw on the act, and that I think that the Congress needs to really seriously consider that. As someone who represented one of the houses of Congress, the other house, in litigation, you know, one of the keys is that you don't want to go into litigation unless you have a fairly good idea of how you're going to come out, because you don't want to create precedent against your own institution. I would not view this as a very good course for this body, because I think that courts would look with disfavor on an effort to force the executive branch to prioritize particular types of cases within the category of terrorism.
Mr. Herdman, is it helpful to design executive branch officers around national security threats that exist today, or is it changing so rapidly that there's a benefit to flexibility?
I would always err in favor of flexibility, Senator. There are, in a moment's notice, the entire threat picture faced by federal law enforcement in the United States could change. It could change as a result of an international incident. It could change as a result of some domestic political event. And I think, you know, federal law enforcement has to be able to respond in a way that addresses the threat as it exists today, as opposed to what it was yesterday or what it was in preceding years. We just have to have that kind of flexibility from federal law enforcement.
Mr. Herdman, in your testimony, you noted many instances in which civilian communities, such as local Jewish community in Cleveland, were targets of attack. You formed strong partnerships to help you disrupt those threats. We're seeing that police are now increasingly becoming targeted for extremist violence. I've introduced a bill to gather more information on attacks on police. What else can we do to combat the rising tide of extremism, violence directed against the police?
Yeah, this is a real area of concern. Again, this is one of those things that does not depend on ideology. If somebody is willing to engage in a violent attack, they've almost always contemplated some sort of engagement with law enforcement. And that leads to, unfortunately, proactive planning by perpetrators when they are actually seeking out to kill, capture, kidnap law enforcement. So I would certainly be supportive of any federal effort to look into the incidents of terrorism directed at law enforcement. And I also certainly would be supportive of any federal measure that would seek to criminalize attacks that are made with the intent of killing law enforcement because of their status.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I appreciate you holding this hearing because I find it difficult to comprehend we're still in this position. We're having the same conversation we've had for years now about domestic terrorism, the racist ideologies motivating violence that are spreading across this country with little or no check against it. Each day and each week seems to bring new tragic incidents, increasing number committed by individuals who hold white supremacist ideologies. You know, no one should be afraid of being murdered because they went to their grocery store or went to their place of worship or when they go to work, even here in the United States Capitol. And yet that's the reality facing millions of Americans every day. The heinous mass shooting in Buffalo last month is a painful reminder that domestic terrorism, motivated by white supremacists, is still very present and is spreading in the United States. That's not hyperbole, that's a fact. Look to the FBI. They reported the number of hate crimes in 2020 was the highest recorded in 2 decades. Nearly half of the domestic terrorism investigations that year involved racially motivated violent extremists. 87% of the subjects of those investigations were white supremacists. And now we have another unspeakable tragedy. 10 individuals killed in Buffalo while shopping at their local grocery store, something we all do and which should be the safest place. But they died at the hands of an individual who had been motivated by a racist conspiracy theory. There's going to be accountability for these crimes. But we also have to act against the root causes of this growing hate. And, as the opening of the chair stated, we need not look further than certain political leaders and media pundits who fan the flames of these ideologies. And in doing that, they give them the sheen of legitimacy. We certainly cannot stand by as they're given mainstream validation. We can be heartbroken, but we must be resolute because lives depend on our ability to extinguish the flames of hatred and violence permeating our country. We say we'll pray for the victims. In my state, we pray that the Congress and all of us will come together and pass real laws that will protect us. We have to stand up to misinformation. We have to act together. This should be above politics. And Mr. Whitfield, I was so moved listening to your testimony and what you said about your mother, Ruth Whitfield. My heart goes out to you and everybody who lost people at the Tops Friendly Markets grocery store. I think your parents married 68 years. Yes. I think of that as I'll celebrate this summer my 60th anniversary. You said your mother was the heart and rock of your family. I know what that means. What would you like us to know about your mother, Ruth, and how your family's been impacted by that loss?
Thank you, Senator.
like you to know that my mother's life mattered. I'd like you to know that there's nothing that we can do to bring her back. I'd like you to know that she didn't deserve to be murdered. I'd like you to know that she was, while she was yet alive, equally frustrated with the banter and the discussions that have gone on for years about white supremacy and inequities within our society. And while she was alive, she spoke vigorously against it. In her death, we're here to carry her legacy forward. And to do what she's no longer able to do. We're here to ask the people here to do their jobs, to live up to the oaths that they took, to serve and protect the people of this country. That's what we're here for. We're not here to ask for favors. We're not here to debate this. This has been going on. You know, this didn't start with my mother's passing. This has been going on my whole life. I was born black, and I was treated differently from the day I was born in this country. And it's time we stood up and recognized that. It's not okay. And we can't keep ignoring it. Thank you, sir.
I thank you, and I pray that we will do the right thing for all Americans. So in my family, for my black grandchildren and my white grandchildren, I pray we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.